Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It has been a heck of a week. So this video, which features the Simon Says Stamp 2018 Halloween limited edition card kit, and it is actually like a part one of an, I'm not sure how many parts it is, was actually supposed to go up on Wednesday. However, my laundry room and my craft room completely flooded, causing a decent amount of damage. So I've dealt with that all Wednesday and Thursday. And for some reason, I can't seem to find the footage of my unboxing, so I'm going to briefly go over what came in the kit. This kit, which is actually still available as I'm filming this, comes with the Simon Says Stamp 6x8 Frightful Fun stamp set. It also comes with the Spooky Boo 6x6 papers. It comes with the American Crafts Treat Bag Kit, which I'm super excited to get into. It also comes with 24 count spider embellishments, some mini glossy accents, white stretch spider web, the Simon Says Stamp Ghost Boo die, some Tonic Nouveau Ivory Sands Pure Sheen glitter, the Pebbles Incorporated Spooky Boo ephemera die cuts, as well as the Spooky Boo puffy stickers. It also comes with the Doodlebug Ghost Braddies and the Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink pad, along with Simon Says Stamp cardstock in the colors black, orange peel, green apple, royal purple, and ivory. So my plan was to actually have about 10 cards made using this kit, and this video is only going to have 5 cards. I'm not actually sure if I'm going to be able to make the other 5 simply because this kit was on the floor, and as we well know, with water and cardboard, they don't go too well together, so I have to assess the damage of the flooding a little bit better. So what I'm doing for this first card is I am taking that Boo die that came in the kit, and I'm running it over some Neenah white cardstock through my Sizzix Sidekick, and I'm just running that through a bunch of times. I'm not exactly sure how many I want or need, so I am just taking a full sheet of cardstock and I am running that through as many times as I can get that die to go through, and I'm saving all of the pieces. My plan is to cover some cardstock with these little Boo dies, and like I said, I'm not sure how many I will actually need. For my card base, I am taking that black cardstock that came in the kit, and I have cut that at 4¼ inches to make it a 4¼ by 11 inch piece of cardstock that I have scored at 5½ inches to make this a top folding A2 size card. Before I will take and arrange each of those ghosts onto my card, I will take out the little die cut pieces and keep those separated and together, and then I will take my multi-matte adhesive, and I'm just putting that all over the back of each of my images and placing those down, and trying to make sure that I don't go too crazy with the glue over the areas that won't be needing the glue, and I'm just going to start slapping those little ghosts down. I want them sticking off the side. I plan to cut that off after I've got all of my little ghosts adhered, and I'm just trying to fill in those gaps as best I can, keeping the Boo and all the little pieces very separate, because I will need those again to put the insides of the Boo where I need those. So I'll just keep doing that. It's actually a super simple card, at least the idea of it is. It did take some time, probably about 20 minutes to make this card, and I didn't use all the Boos, I didn't use all of the little ghosts. I did have some left over, and I ended up keeping all of the Boo sentiments themselves separate. So here you can see I'm just trimming off, after I've turned those over, I'm trimming off the excess of each of those ghosts, and I'm going to keep some of those pieces because I plan to fill in some of the gaps with some of those pieces as well. To put the centers of the letters back inside, I'm actually using my reverse tweezers to do this, along with that same liquid glue. I'm just putting that on the centers of each of those letters, and then I'll let that set for a second. And I'll grab the B next, and I will do the exact same thing. I was trying to keep all the pieces together so it would be so much more easy, or so much easier to assemble this card. And I did that with all the letters. And once I had that in, I used my little craft pick to pull out the actual letters themselves. And I do that with all of them. And now moving on, I wanted a sentiment. I know it says Boo all over that, but I grabbed a sentiment from the stamp set called Boo to You, and now I'm just trimming that down. I did that on that same Neenah cardstock, and I'm adhering that to just a scrap of cardstock that I have in my stash, and I'm going to use my wire trimmer from Fiskars to trim that down. rather than try and measure how big I wanted that piece, I just stuck that on top. I adhered that to the cardstock, and then I stuck the whole thing inside my paper trimmer, and I'm trimming that down. That wire guide makes it so easy to get an even cut all around. And then I'll use some foam tape on the back of that so that it has a little bit of dimension from all the rest of the booze. And then I'm going to start working on the inside of my card. So I just have some Neenah cardstock cut down to 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I'm going to use some of those scraps of that cardstock that I used on the outside to try and tie everything onto the inside. And I have the sentiment Happy Halloween, Happy and Halloween, they're separate. And I'm using that intense black ink that came in the kit to stamp that sentiment on the inside of my card, along with my Mini Misty, which helps because clearly I didn't do a good job stamping the first time. And I'll pull that out, and then I will adhere those little paper strips using my guide, on my glass mat, I'm using the guide to make sure that those are fairly straight. And then I will turn those over and trim those off once they're adhered. And then I will glue that to the inside of my card using that same tape runner that I used to adhere the scraps. And then for a final bit of embellishment, I'm going to use those Nuvo Glow Drops in Sour Apple that I've been pretty obsessed with when it comes to the Halloween cards that I've been doing this year. I can't get enough of them. I may have to get other colors because I know they come in other colors, but I am in love with these drops. They are just so fun. So I couldn't stop myself. I put them all over the background, in between all the different ghosts, and just doing, variations in sizes. And I'll show you what that looks like when it's glowing in the dark here in a second. They glow so nicely. I love them. And so that will finish off that first card for this kit. For card number 2, I have grabbed the stamp set and some Express It cardstock, and I have cut that down and I have put that into my Mini Misty, and I'm going to use that intense black ink from Simon Says Stamp that came in the kit because I'm curious how this works with Copics. I know people talk about it and how nice it is, and so I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. I typically like my Memento, and even with the Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, I'm not super fond of that one. I mean, it works fine, but you always have to heat set it, and I typically forget to do that, so I end up smearing the ink. And this one I let sit for a little while, so so far so good. So I'm Copic coloring, and I have all the colors up on the screen, and the challenge with this was actually to, because it's a tree and some ground and a picket fence back there, I'm using browns. So I didn't, you want to add some color, some pops of color, and you don't want it to be all drab. So I've chosen a few variations in browns. So for my picket fence, I used E87 and E89. For my little owl, I used E21 and E33. And for my tree, I am covering that with E44, and then I'm going to add some texture using E47. And I'll just use some strokes with that. And I have sped this up quite a bit. It's about 4 times. So I'm just trying to go along with the strokes that are even in the detail of the stamp, just to add some texture to that tree. And it's a lot right now, so I will calm that down using the E44 marker over the top of that. And I end up really liking the way that it looks. So like I said, the challenge was adding color when all you have is brown. So this is where I grabbed my YG01, and I am just going on the outside of that tree and the fence because I'm trying to add like an aura, I suppose. And typically, you'd probably want to do some sort of a sky background, but I thought that might even be a little bit dark. And so I went with the colors that come in the papers. And now I'm adding some darker shades with YG23. And I end up just loving this. Sometimes it's fun to just kind of play around. And I really like the aura that I ended up having with this tree. So for my grass, I will use that YG23, so since that's the darker green. And I've trimmed that down, and I've trimmed down some pattern paper, and then I am using that green apple cardstock that came in the kit, and I have scored that at 5.5 inches to make that a top folding A2 size card. And I even trimmed down one of the little sentiments that came in the pattern paper. So I'm going to start adhering all of that with my tape runner, which is just a Tombow tape runner. And I had trimmed down that pattern paper to be 4 inches by 5 1/4. And I am going to put my image a little cockeyed. I wanted it to, since this is a fairly simple card, wanted it to have, just a little bit of interest. And then I will tape down my sentiment, and I will grab some of those Pebbles, those Boo Puffy stickers by Pebbles, and I'm putting down the bats. But once again, with a card like this, I felt like I needed to stamp the sentiment on the inside. So that sentiment says, have a Halloween, what does that say? It says, have a Halloween full of frightful fun. And I just stamped that on the inside, and that will finish off card number 2. Card number 3 may actually be my favorite, mostly because of the little image that I'm going to use, along with the cute little sentiments that go with it. So I've grabbed out that little bone skeleton guy, along with the 2 of the sentiments that go along with him. And I have lined those up in my Mini Misty onto some Express It cardstock. I'm going to do a little bit more Copic coloring. All these cards that I'm doing are very simple cards. That's the point of them. This kit, I want it to, if I needed quick Halloween cards for friends or whatever, I could just pop these out real quick. And I'm using that intense black ink once again to stamp out my sentiment and my images. And very simple Copic coloring, colors I've already used. I'm sticking with a theme, and if they're new colors, I have those up on the screen for you. So instead of using grays, I decided to use the blue violets. So these are BV20 and BV25 for his hat and for his little shadowing all over his little bony body. And then for his bow tie, some YR16. And I'm just filling in all the gaps. It's super simple coloring. And then I have trimmed that down, and I am adding a little bit of shadowing underneath him. My card base is just some of that royal purple cardstock that came in the kit that I've scored at 5.5 inches, once again, to make a top folding A2 size card. I tend to like those the best. And I've trimmed down all of my pattern paper pieces, and I'm going to start adhering those using that Tombow tape runner as well. Just couldn't avoid using those adorable little skeleton pattern papers. And then I'm using some of the scraps from one of the previous cards that I made. And I will put all that down. So that sentiment just makes me giggle. It says, it's going tibia, great Halloween. And then the last part says, I feel it in my bones. I can't help it but giggle every time I read that. It's just so clever. So I'm going to pop that up with some foam tape all over the back of those sentiments. And then I'm going to add a few little embellishments, just like I have with the other ones. My point with making these quick cards was, the idea for friends and for you guys to have some quick ideas, but also we're having a craft fair this weekend that I'm trying to sell my cards just to raise a little money for my daughter's volleyball team. They're headed to state soon, so I figured if I had some quick Halloween cards, people might really enjoy that. And my inside sentiment says, have a spooky Halloween. And then I'm going to grab some of those Pebble Puffy stickers, and I'm going to add one of the spider webs on the outside and one on the inside as well. And then for a final bit of embellishment, because I can't avoid them and I love them, I'm going to use those Sour Apple glow-in-the-dark drops once again. And I'll just put a few on the outside. I won't go as crazy as I did with the first card that I made. And then once I'm done there, that will finish off card number 3. It's going to be a great group of cards. Haha. Card number 4 is a little bit more of the same. For this part of this, kit, I wanted to make sure that I was, just focusing mostly on cards. And so I'm not using all the elements or even, probably even half the elements that actually came in this kit. That's why I plan to do another part and at least one more part, maybe 2. I want to show off the craft bags, or not the craft bags, but the little goodie bags that you can make, and just using other of the various parts of the kit to do that. So what I did is I stamped out my image using that intense black ink, and I have covered that with some Simon Says stamp masking paper. And so, because I want to have some more pumpkins in there, but I want those to be behind that main image. So I have masked him off, and I trimmed him out, and now I'm stamping down those other pumpkins using that same intense black ink. And that is, again, on that Express It cardstock. So I will also grab the little moon that comes in the kit, and I'm going to use some Tailored Expressions potato chip dye ink. I thought this was not a super bright yellow. It was a fairly subdued yellow in my opinion, and I thought that's kind of the look I was going for. I didn't want it to be too vibrant. I didn't want it to overtake my pumpkins. And so I'm also going to do the stars. That comes with 3 little stars in this stamp set as well. This stamp set is jam-packed with images and sentiments, and it is definitely worth it. So I stamped out the stars a couple times as well. And then I will pull that out of my Mini Misty once that's all stamped, and I will remove the mask. And I keep those masks. I'm just going to stick that onto my stamp set so that I have that for future use. And for my coloring, once again, fairly simple. And I have the new colors that I'm introducing because I'm keeping to mostly the same colors. I'm putting the new colors up on the screen. So I'm using a Y35 and YR16 for my pumpkins. It isn't necessarily a typical color palette that I would have chosen, but I ended up really liking the way the yellow and the yellow red went together. So I'm going to go back and forth and blend those out. And I really love the contrast of those 2 colors, like I said. And then for the inside of his eyes and mouth, Y15, and then going back to those same colors that I have previously used before. So for my greens, it was the YGs that I had used. And for his hat, I'm using the BVs, BV20 and BV25. And then I'll put down some ground so that those pumpkins aren't just floating there, and color off his little band on his witch hat as well. My card base is the orange cardstock that came in the kit. This is the orange peel, and I have that as a top folding A2 size card, and I've trimmed down some pattern papers. And I'm going to go old school here. I decided I need a little bit more something. So I'm going to take that intense black ink pad and I'm just going to rub it right over the edges of that image. And I love how that looked. So I will back my little pattern paper behind my colored panel, putting that Tombow adhesive directly onto the back panel so that way I can line it up exactly how I want it. And I'm not worried about having some excess paper. I will trim that off later. And I did the exact same thing on the top so that I just have a little bit of that pattern paper poking through, and that way I'm not using up too much of the pattern paper. And then I will use that same Tombow adhesive and adhere that to the front of my card. And then I end up finding out that I have a lot to trim off. So I will trim off all that excess on both sides. And then I will start taking care of the rest of the card. So I also take the intense black ink and rub that all over my sentiment, which came from the pattern papers as well. I'll adhere that using that same Tombow adhesive. As I've said in many videos before, when I use kits, I like to kind of stay the same themes, simply because I sometimes give them out as gifts. And if they all match, that's a little bit easier to do, for me anyway. And once again, using those glow-in-the-dark Sour Apple Nouveau Crystal Drops. For my sentiment on the inside, it's just Happy Halloween. And that will finish off this card. So now let's move on to card number 5. The filming of card number 5 started out how the rest of my week has gone, so I missed the stamping. But you get the idea. I have stamped the sentiment on the bottom of that pattern paper panel, and then I did stamp my image onto some Express It cardstock using that same Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. And now I plan to just do some Copic coloring like I have all over the rest, like with the rest of the cards that I've made. And I'm using the exact same colors. Nothing new has been brought in. For my little dog, I'm using the BVs. I thought the blue violets would be a nice touch rather than just using some blacks. And of course, kind of coloring him the same way that I would color my own dog, or have, my own dog. And for the casket, I'm using those same colors. I think those are the E44s and the E47s. And I love the detail on these stamps. So it makes it so easy to add some shadowing. I just go over where some of the details are, and then it takes some of the guesswork out of where your shadows might end up being, because there's so much beautiful detail on these images. And it's a simple image, so I colored it fairly simply. Just adding a little R12 for his cheeks and his ears. And then I fussy cut him out. And then I will go on to making the rest of the cards. So my card base is once again an A2, top folding A2 size card that was scored at 5.5 inches, making it, again, top folding A2 size card. So for the rest of my elements, I'm going to finally bring in some of those, some of the other elements from the kit. I'm going to bring in the glitter. And so in order to adhere that glitter, I am using some score tape, and I am lining that up along my glass mat to make sure that it's not crooked. And then I will trim that down, and once that is, I want to make sure that's very well adhered to my card front. I'm grabbing just some computer paper, it's just some scrap computer paper, and I will peel off that backing paper. And then I will cover that with that beautiful Nuvo glitter. It is so pretty. I plan to use this with many projects. The only downside to glitter, of course, is that I will get it everywhere. Even though I'm using scrap paper, that glitter I'm getting everywhere. So I have covered that with that paper, and then I will burnish that in to try and make sure that it, the least amount of glitter will flake off of there as possible. So I'm burnishing really well, and then I will dump the excess off. And I'm actually going to use an old baby wipe, which a Swiffer cloth would work really well to pick up the rest of the mess after I've dumped that back inside my jar. So adhering the rest of it, I'm just using my Tombow tape runner like I have for the other cards, and then I'll trim off the excess. Of course, more glitter everywhere. And then I'll trim off that excess. And then to adhere the rest of that, I love what that says. It says, "You're so awesome, it's spooky." And these sentiments can be moved around all different ways to give you just many varieties of sentiment. And then once again, I will trim off that excess. My adorable little dog image is going to be popped up on some foam tape for some dimension. And then I will grab some of those Spooky Boo puffy stickers by Pebbles, and I'm just going to put one of the spiders and then one of the spider webs up on top. And then for my sentiment on the inside, which says, "Have a mummy-nificent Halloween," I'm using that same intense black ink to stamp that down. And that will finish off this card. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 5 cards that I did make today. If you liked this video, go ahead and hit that like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. This is part 1 of I don't know how many parts, so there's going to be more, but I'd love to know which one of these cards that I made today is your favorite. That's probably, like I've always said, my favorite part of making these. So thanks so much for stopping by.